So I'm Gene Poole, and I'm going to talk briefly today about how I got into computer programming and how it took me 14 years to be a full-time developer, actually building features. Early on, my first introduction to programming was an Atari 400. We had Pac-Man and Centipede and an Atari cartridge and a basic cartridge. And I played a lot of the Pac-Man and Centipede, but you get a little tired of that after a while. And that basic cartridge turned out to be a wondrous thing because there were these program listings available in magazines at the time. And you could sit there and type those in and make the computer do new and interesting things. Didn't have a cassette deck to save the data off, so it was always type it in brand new. And those listings often had typos and omissions in them, so learned a lot about debugging doing that. After playing with the Atari, my next introduction to computer programming was gaming and getting into modding. Spent a lot of time on the Dark Forces game, busy updating it and learning how to build levels and do the scripting behind that. And this was about the time of the dot-com bust. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a career and had finished up the hours I needed in high school to graduate. So I had time to go to Votech. So I was kind of deciding between doing one of the trades where they had a computer class and they got a grant to do Cisco networking. So ended up going to the Votech class for that. Ended up earning a CCNA while I was there in high school. And that was how I decided to go into computers. I worked retail and did some manual labor in high school and decided that what I wanted to do for a long-term career involved being inside in an office with other professionals and not interacting directly with the public. So I was hoping I could get there with working in the computer industry. This was early 2000s by the time I got into college. And at that time, if you wanted to be a programmer or work in industry, it seemed like you needed to have a bachelor's degree. So I went and did that for 4 years. Walked into the information services department there in college, looking for a work study position with the CCNA, really helped land that. So I got to work with the information services department for 4 years, fixed computers and ran networking cable and fixed telephone systems. And while I was in college, one of our professors put together a team for the DARPA Grand Challenge. And that was a fun project. I was definitely not prepared to work on that project, but got to learn a lot about using cameras and accelerometers and a GPS unit and trying to tie all that data together to make servos move a vehicle. We didn't make it past the preliminary round, but it was a good experience. But working through all that kind of soured me on programming as a career because that was definitely a crunch. So when I graduated, I found a job repairing computers again and pulling network cable. And the little third-party IT company I worked for had contracts to do support for a couple machine shops in the area. So ended up fixing CNC machines and whatnot, keeping them running, because they had old DOS computers in them that they were using to run their G code. So that was interesting. Did that for about a year and decided that I really wanted to do something closer to software. And a couple of folks I had gone to college with had landed a job at a company up in the city. And they recommended I put in an application up there. So that's how I ended up with my second real job. And they didn't have any openings in their engineering department, but they did have openings in their implementations department. So I signed up to do that. And that was a great job for someone straight out of college. Got to travel around for about 5 years and see a lot of the US. I was traveling. I'd install the software and train folks in how to use it. So that was fun. Although this was in the financial industry, providing software to banks. And that was about the time the great financial crisis hit. And pretty much everyone stayed in place that could keep their job and was not looking for raises or promotions. So I stuck in that position for about 5 years. And as I was getting towards the end of those 5 years, I was getting a little tired of being on the road all the time and doing the implementation side, I wanted to be closer to engineering. And the QA manager wanted someone to help with QA and had chatted with my manager, and he came looking for volunteers. And it was closer to engineering, so I volunteered. And while I was in between projects for a couple of weeks, I ran QA scripts and whatnot. And that was interesting. But what was really nice was a couple months later, when a position came open over on the engineering side of the house, the QA manager threw my name in the pot to move over. So that was nice. And I moved on over to being an escalation support engineer. So still not developing features, but spent a lot of time digging through network traces and crash dumps and hang dumps and providing bug fixes. And did that for about 6 years and started getting itchy feet, wanted to do more feature development stuff. And most of the software we were working on was in maintenance mode. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity to write new stuff. So a couple of folks that I had worked with there had moved on other places. And in fact, a guy I knew through my homebrew club worked at this new place, and they were doing new feature development and needed someone to do a little test automation for them. So ended up moving over there. And after doing test automation for about 2 years, they had an opening on their feature team. So just this last July, I moved over to working on a feature team. So for anyone taking notes, that's about 14 years from graduating college to actually being full-time developer on a feature team. Thanks for letting me share my story with y'all.